Idols of the heart. Well, we know that when the Bible speaks of the heart, most time it speaks of the spirit. These idols they were turned to in their spirit. You know, Jesus said, God's a spirit. Those who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. And God says in this passage, he says that everyone of the house of Israel who sets up his idols in his heart and puts before him what causes him to stumble into iniquity, who sets these idols up in his heart that's going to cause him to fall over into iniquity, to stumble, to fall over into sin, and to fall over to transgression against the Lord, to do things that are displeasing to the Lord and contrary to his word. God says these things are abomination. So God looks at this pretty seriously. God looks on the inward man, and the word even tells us, it's not in that context, but you can apply it to that, where the word even tells us that God looks not on the outward appearance, but he looks on the inward, the heart of man. God is more concerned about our heart. Why? Because that's the place, the heart, the spirit, that's the place where the Holy Spirit communicates with us. That's where he speaks to us. That's where he leads us. That's how he guides us. His spirit with our spirit. He knows that that spirit gets corrupted, then we can't hear his spirit very well. And so we've got to work at keeping our spirit clean, keep it from getting cluttered up with idols of the heart and things like that. And God says, some of these folks just don't take it seriously enough. He says, he reiterates in verse 7, anyone of the house of Israel or the strangers who dwell in Israel, who separates himself from me, sets up his idols in his heart, puts before him what causes him to stumble into iniquity, then comes to a prophet to inquire of him concerning me. Then God says, I'll answer him myself. God says, I'll take this matter up. God says, you set these idols up in your heart. You said, listen, let's kind of parallel it to where we are now. How many Christians get up every morning and read their horoscope? Such junk, such foolishness. But some of them turn to it religiously every day. You see them on Facebook, and they're publishing the horoscope for today. And these same people are professing Christians. How are you going to place your faith in a horoscope and at the same time say your faith is in God? You can't do that. It won't work. Why? It's kind of like the song that we sing sometime, We Need God in America Again, and we've heard it quoted other times as well, other places. Why turn to the stars for your help when you can turn to the maker of the stars? The stars are just created things. Why turn to created things when you can turn to the creator himself? And so God says, I'll set my face against that man, that woman, that person. And I'm going to make him a sign and a proverb. I'm going to make an example out of him. And cut him off from the midst of my people. Then you're going to know that I am the Lord, he says. So false images of God, idols, are manufactured in a person's mind to lead to a faulty view of God that supersedes what he has revealed about himself in his word. John Calvin said this. He said, man's nature is a perpetual factory of idols. Man's nature is a perpetual factory of idols. People prefer a God who's always tolerant and always loving and always forgiving. In other words, they want a God who forgoes judgment and never condemns. It's kind of like saying, let us make God in our image. So there are images that God himself has made. Images of God that he has made. So we'll cover a few of them, and we should have time to squeeze most of this in. First of all, Adam and Eve were created in his image. Genesis 1, verse 26 and 27. If you'd like to turn there, you can. It says, and God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness. And let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. God says, let us. Let us. Now he was speaking not only to what the New Testament reveals to be the rest of the Trinity, the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. But I believe and you don't have to buy this as it ain't for sale, but this is just something that kind of turns over in me. I believe that he was speaking to the entire host of heaven and the angels as well. Not that he was soliciting their help. I'm not saying that, but I believe he was letting them know. This is what's going on. Let us. And he announced it to heaven. He announced it to the host of heaven. I believe that. And so he says, let us make man in our image. And that very likely refers to the qualities of reason, personality, intellect, the capacity to relate, to hear, to see, to speak. All these characteristics of God were created in us. The reason that we have all these capacities, the reason we have the capacity to laugh and enjoy humor is because we're created in the image of God. The Bible said that God laughs. The reason we have the ability to cry, the emotion that sets off crying in us, is because Jesus wept. We're created in his image. Listen, the reason you even have the capacity to become angry is because we're created in the image of God. All of the capacities, all of the characteristics of God. See, when it says that we were created in his image, it didn't just mean a physical image, but it meant all the divine characteristics and everything. When God created Adam, when he scooped him up out of the dirt of the ground and he breathed in him, he breathed into him the spirit, the breath of God. And man became a living soul. God breathed into him all of his characteristics, all of his integrity, all of his emotions. Everything of God was breathed into Adam. And listen, since Adam fell, that's why many of those emotions and everything have gotten perverted. Mm-hmm. Before Adam fell, he had all the character, the perfect, sinless characteristics of God. Now, God didn't make him God, but he made him in his image, in his likeness. And so that incorporates all of these abilities to do all these things and all of these characteristics of God that he chose to reproduce in mankind. And this is what separates humans from animals. I know there's always the constant question, there's always the constant talk about, well, is my dog going to go to heaven when he dies? Are my cats going to be, is Micah going to be, I'd love to see Micah in heaven. I don't know for sure about all that because animals are just a different level of creation. Only man was created in the image of God. Nothing else was. I believe, I kind of, and again, this is something you don't have to buy it in for sale. I kind of believe that, it's kind of like the little girl that was told one time when she was on her own deathbed. She asked her mommy. She said, "Mommy, is my I think it was a cat or kitty or something, called his name. Is he going to be in heaven?" She said, "Honey, I'm sure. I'm sure when you get to heaven, your kitty will be there. That God will have your kitty for you." And I'm sure that maybe along those lines, you can kind of look at it like that. But man is the only one with an eternal spirit because of being made in the image and likeness of God. The likeness of God includes all of our rational, moral, and spiritual qualities. And so, as rational beings, we have intellect. We have it. Now, all this falls in the soulish realm. And when we taught on the trichotomy of man before, we covered some of this ground before, probably. So I won't camp out there. But we have intellect. We have emotion and will, just like God. has all these things. And as moral beings, we are able to, of course, share in God's communicable attributes. In other words, his love. We're able to exhibit love, integrity, wisdom. These attributes we can also attain to and acquire. And so as spiritual beings, we have an eternal spirit with the capacity to fellowship with God. Now, I talk about animals. I do believe that animals have a kind of a spiritual sense about things. We see that from the Bible. We see with Balaam's donkey, that God even used him to speak to him, but Balaam's donkey sensed that something was going on. And I do believe animals have somewhat of a spiritual sense because they have a soul, probably. And but they just don't have that fellowship with God that mankind has because of us being created in his image. And so we have all that, but again, like I mentioned a while ago, because of sin, because of the fall, the image was distorted and it was corrupted. But originally, man was made. Adam and Eve were created in his image. Then